Hello, hello, welcome. This is Managing in the Moment. I am your host, Betsaida LeBron. So this is a weekly show that is for you if you are a people manager and you're really looking for a more effective way to lead and to manage people. So this show, as always, is sponsored by Improv EQ. So team building and management coaching. You can find more information at improveq.org. We offer team building workshops, trainings, and management coaching, all things soft skills and supporting the people to people collaboration, connection, and communication. So I am your host. I am a team building strategist and management coach and founder of Improv EQ. I'm Betsaida LeBron, and I'm so excited that you're here to really this conversation that I get to have. As always, I have different guests that are on the show where we talk about different aspects of what it means to really lead in this modern space in this modern way as a manager and what that means. And so the conversation that I get to have today, I'm so excited that you're here for it. I talked to Kelly Durden Posey about the hidden needs that employees have and how that's so important to figure out what those needs are, but then also how, as a manager, you can support and show up and take care of your people so that ultimately we're really talking about employee engagement. We're talking about people feeling heard and valued and accepted and included. And so I'll tell you a little bit about her. So she is an attorney, and her practice is inspired inclusivity consulting. And so she is what she calls herself a, a mindful mama at law, which I love. And so we had this really great conversation about what that means to think about these hidden needs. And I love that she comes at it from her unique perspective, that it's about inclusivity, and that's what we want. We want everyone to feel valued and to be heard and to be connected. But then there's also like the legal aspects of what kind of prevents people from starting these conversations and taking care of their people because they're afraid of what that means. So she really does a beautiful job of demystifying what that law requires and also what it means to really step in and take care of people when it comes to inclusivity. So before we get into that conversation, there is a term that I want to make sure you know what it means, because as I've been talking to people recently, I've heard that they had never heard the term neurodiversity. So if that happens to be you, no problem. I just want to let you know. So neurodiversity really just means a different brain and the ways that you process and kind of think and connect. So I myself am neurodivergent, and it just means that there's, neurotypical, which is the typical way that brains kind of function. And we just say that because it's most of the what we've seen is this kind of neurotypical way of being. And a lot of the work environment, a lot of corporate structures are set up for neurotypical people, so people who think this way. But like for myself, I have ADHD. That's one different way. People who have autism, right? We're different ways of just thinking and processing. And it doesn't mean that one is better or worse. It's just different. And so when you're thinking about inclusivity, also incorporating the neurotypical outside of the neurotypical, right? The neurodivergent folks is really important. And so we'll talk about that in this, but I just wanted to give you that language and understanding because not everybody has heard of neurodivergence before. So now you do. I'll see you on the other side of the video. Hi, Kelly. I am so excited. Thank you for being on the show. And so, first, what I think is really exciting about like how we met was about kind of talking about the same spaces that we're in as far as making spaces more creating a better sense of belonging and diversity and inclusion. And then we also kind of vibed on our neurodivergency and then really thinking about, oh, how does that make sense in workspaces? And we had this really awesome conversation offline that I was like, can we make this an episode of the show? And I'm so thankful. Yes. So now we're here and we're going to chat with just helping managers really think about some of these hidden needs that employees have, and the kinds of things that, they maybe aren't thinking about that would really be beneficial for them to understand and think about just a little bit differently. So I know that was a whole lot of setup just to be like, hi, I'm so excited that you're here. Um, so yeah, so in that kind of context, I guess, do you want to tell us a little bit about just kind of the kind of work that you do and why this idea of hidden needs also resonates with you?
Yeah, and I gotta thank you for having me here because I just really enjoy talking through these things with you, and talking with someone who seems to understand it so well, both from experience and from talking to people. It just feels great. So I could talk about it for days. So, but which is why, of course, I infuse that into my business because my business is called Inspired Inclusivity Consulting, and I am serious about being inspired. Every little piece of who I am and what I've been through is kind of what I bring to the business. And every little thing that I learn, it is a thing that I think other people can learn from. And so for me, I tell people I'm the mindful mama at law, helping demystify the art and language of inclusion because it's not a language that everybody is speaking. And if they are, they're not speaking it in the same way. So I like to help people gain that language so that they can feel supported and they can feel prepared when they go into what can be really tough conversations. And it can be extremely tough if you recognize that there might be something underlying, some behavior that you're seeing from an employee. You want to be careful, but you want to find out how you can best support them. So that language is what I hope to help people gain.
Yeah. No, and I love that you say that piece because that really hits on this idea that like there are hidden needs. There are things that are not obvious just on the surface when you're thinking about how you're supporting your employees and your team. And so, I mean, and there's so many, and one of the ones, just from my personal experience of, neurodivergency and having ADHD and the kinds of things that, my brain just works differently than a neurotypical brain. And so sometimes, I've had managers who didn't understand that and who wanted me to perform in the way that made sense to them. And it was such a challenge. And looking back on it, things that like didn't have to be a challenge if there had just been the ability to have some conversation and ultimately like some flexibility.
Yes. Flexibility across the board, please. I agree. And I think the more managers you have sometimes, the more you feel like there can't be flexibility or it's not clear where there can be flexibility. So if you have an employee who's showing up late consistently and you say, well, I need everybody to be here at the exact same time. But if there's a hidden need or there's something else underlying that might require thinking outside the box about something you thought you absolutely couldn't be flexible on, this is how you find out if there's a need and then how you address it. You've got to know what to ask so you can really support people.
Yeah. And so like, and I think that, it's shifting, and we talked about this and just kind of the idea of like what it means to be a manager and really like this managing people. And it's changed a lot. I think that this movement of really putting people first is gaining a lot of momentum, and people are really thinking about how they manage and thinking about how they interact with people as complete humans. And that means that you have to take into account not just what they're doing between 9 and 5, right? It's their whole life, their whole world. And that also includes, a lot of the different things that they're challenged with. And so, from talking about neurodivergency or whether it be mental health issues, sometimes, it's family, different things, if they're supporting young kids or, parents that are, that need, and so there's so many different things that aren't obvious when you first just meet someone or even just interacting with them. So for like managers, and curious, you want to throw out some things for managers who are thinking about, okay, I'm obviously they're here, they're listening to the show because they care about their people. Kind of what's the first thing that you have them start to like kind of think about, because it's not, that's the thing, is that the point is that this isn't obvious stuff.
Mm-hmm. It's not, And you don't want to wait until you see a problem to start getting details that might be helpful to support someone. It's like you don't want to be the person stalking the Skype to see if the person's gone inactive. You don't want to be that. And so to avoid even getting there, literally engage your employees in a way that is meaningful and not one size fits all. Just like you were mentioning, we are having to support in a way that takes into account the whole person, and you cannot be one size fits all if you are really taking into account people's situations. So just starting from there and being genuine when you say, how are things? How are you? Or what is it that I can do to help support you right now? Just those basic questions and really sticking around to listen for the answer can have a huge impact.
Yeah. When we chatted, we were talking about like this way that like kind of naturally it feels like, and maybe not naturally is not the right word, but that more often than not, when people say, how are you? It's this scripted game that we're playing where if I say, how are you? You're going to respond, good, fine, right? Even if that's not true. And so like as a manager, it's so important to not just leave it at that. And I like that you're like, but like stick around, listen to the answer, and ask in different ways, right? Because sometimes people need to hear that in different ways. And I think also managers sometimes expect there just to automatically be trust and communication, and that like, but I asked you, so you should just tell me what's up. And it's like, but maybe you haven't quite earned that level of trust with that staff member. And also each person's unique and different, right? Each of us have our walls up higher or lower. And so it's going to take different, it's not a one size fits all, even in getting to know someone, even in building trust.
So
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, I always think of the difference between the question of "Are you good?" versus "How are you?" One is a lot more open ended, and it doesn't really assume anything. It invites that response. Whereas when you say "You're good, right?" or I hope you're well," that traditional email greeting. I hope you're well, because that would slow me down in this email if you weren't. So it's kind of that implied response, but really being genuine about asking and being intentional about listening. And that level of trust that you're earning, you may have had a really deep level of trust, but these sometimes hidden needs that people have, that takes just a whole different level of trust to share. And that takes a little more work to earn.
Yeah, that's such a good point because it's it can be really scary to disclose some of these things, like we talked about, whether it be mental health condition, whether it be, caring for family members, whether it be, whatever's going on, you're having something is going on, personally, physically, that is preventing you from showing up and giving your 100% at work. That's not the kind of stuff that we traditionally want to share. Like we're not posting, that online. Typically we try to, especially in this culture of just kind of just push it down and push through. And you're a hero if you could just like keep going. Um,
Yes, unfortunately. And I would venture to say that you might think that even if you did share some of those things, it wouldn't have any impact on how your manager interacts with you, at least not a positive one. You might think that they are going to judge your situation and say, you know what, I don't want them to know any of that. I just need them to see my work product. Hopefully that'll get me by, and I don't want them to feel sorry for me. Or I don't want them to deal with whatever stigma might be attached to whatever. I don't want special treatment. I just want to be, able to do my job. And those types of feelings, that's normal. But as a manager, you know that there are other ways that you can support in those situations. So it's kind of up to you to pull that out in a way that gets the information you need to give the support they want.
right. And that's what I loved about, kind of our conversation and this take of like how we were talking about managers better understanding these hidden needs, because traditionally it's always been on the employee. Like It's always about giving them tools to be able to advocate for yourself, to be able to like say what you need. And sometimes, and thinking of my position and when I didn't know what I needed because I wasn't 100% sure what was possible. I didn't know what I could ask for. And so that made it very hard to start these conversations where as a manager, you you have an opportunity to support people. Like you said, don't wait until there's already this huge problem to be proactive and to support people. Um, yeah.
I mean, that the possibilities as a manager, you are more familiar with just a wide variety of work styles, work ethics, workarounds, accommodations. And that employee, if given the benefit of the doubt, is just familiar with how they work. Maybe they're close peers. So you are in this unique position to supply all of these different types of solutions, some bigger than others, but it could be something so small that could have such a big impact. But they may never have heard of that being a thing, without you putting it out there in a way that they found meaningful. So you have so much influence as a manager. Use it for good.
Yes, right. The power, right? With great power comes great responsibility. And I think that's such an important piece that, as managers are thinking about having these conversations, I think there's a couple things that I want to bring up, and I want to get your style, your input on it, especially with the legal background that you have. There's the one that, having the conversation with the staff versus making these assumptions for the staff, right? And then also when you want to find out kind of what's going on or how you can support, there's a really got to be thoughtful and careful in the way that you do that. And that's more in kind of, if you could speak to that just a little bit, because we're not encouraging managers to break the law here. Yeah.
Right. Right. Because, and I like to say there's a fine line, but oftentimes it's not as fine as you would think. And where I always tell managers, just ask a question, put it out there, and then see how you can deal with the response. They say, well, I don't want to be nosy. I don't want to violate the law because I do know enough to know this person has a medical situation going on, or, they've got something else that you're concerned you might be walking a fine legal line by asking questions about. You're not asking questions about specifics. You're asking questions about how this person is handling what they're dealing with right now. You're opening the door for them to say, this is a challenge for me, or that is an area where I think I could use some help, without assuming, based on your own personal biases, what might be challenging for them. I mean, we all bring those personal biases in based on our experiences. I mean, if you've had a child, you can say, wow, I know it was tough when I was pregnant because, but if you assume that any given person that you're managing who happens to be pregnant is having those same challenges, and you take steps to support them in a way that you would have been supported, you're really missing what their actual needs are. And it might not be helpful or meaningful for them in a way that they really need. So you've got to, even if you feel like be sure to ask open-ended questions that get the details you need to help generate a solution.
Yeah, which connects perfectly to that collaboratively work and talk with them to figure out what's going to be helpful, what accommodations, if any, are necessary. Because, yeah, it can be really tempting as a manager to just feel like I know best, I will take care of things, and just swoop in and like do things for them that haven't been asked for. And that is just having been on the receiving end of someone trying to do things for me, or trying to like move things to like and move me to a different team to make my life easier without having any conversation with me about why or what they were thinking before it happened, was absolutely frustrating and hurtful.
Yes. And it almost feels punitive, right?
Yes.
You feel like you're being punished because you couldn't live up to the expectation. And from the manager perspective, it's the opposite. It's, hey, I don't want you to feel this way. Let me help you by. And in doing that, you're imputing what you believe is the best solution without asking or without even, talking through it. And I've had that happen myself from an extremely well-meaning manager who said, no worries. I know that things were getting a little out of hand. I went ahead and, dangerous words. But had that conversation taken place 5 minutes before the action that manager rightfully knew needed to happen, because they weren't wrong, but had that conversation happen before, hey, I was thinking of, or do you think it would be helpful if, any of those little phrases to get in there and get my buy-in or get my opinion about different solutions would have completely changed the entire feeling I had after the situation, so that phrasing makes all the difference.
Well, and it's autonomy. It's the idea that we can be in control of our own lives. And when even if it's the most well-meaning intention, they've taken away your autonomy, it makes you feel like there's not trust here. It makes you question, what am I giving to this organization when they don't really see me fully? And it makes so many other things come to the surface, because all of a sudden you're not being treated like an adult. And that's the thing. And a lot of these things that happen is, and that's one of the frustrating things about, the times where I've told people that I have ADHD, is they sometimes will treat me like I'm a child because of it. And I know that that's, happened in other places. I used to work in mental health advocacy, and that would happen a lot when people would disclose, and all of a sudden it would be like they would be handled with kid gloves because of, because, they have, bipolar, or because of this. And I was like, we don't have to whisper. And we also, we also don't need to talk about this. Like, it's just one of those things. It's like, everyone has different kinds of struggles. And so recognizing that everybody ultimately, like, you have to believe that people know what's best for them. Right?
Right. Or if they don't know, if given the right set of resources, they could choose the thing that feels right for them. And then if it doesn't work that time, they could choose something else. The solutions don't have to be the one and only thing that you choose forever. It can be, let's try this first. If you find that this might work better later, let's move to that. There can be a number of solutions.
So true. I'm glad you brought that up. The thing too, like, and you actually said this earlier, before we started recording, was that sometimes people don't even know what's going on. So they might not even be aware, we're talking about like a hidden need. If it comes with like a, potential diagnosis of some kind, they might not even be aware of it, or they just, whatever's going on, they're obviously, exhibiting certain things, they're showing up in a certain way, but they might not really be fully aware of kind of why. Exactly. And that doesn't mean that you change how you support them, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's the idea that no matter what the diagnosis, whether there's a diagnosis, certain behaviors can be indicative of certain struggles. But no matter what, asking about, what may be going on so you can get a better read on it can be so empowering for the manager and for the employee. I was a person that was diagnosed very late with ADHD, just a year and a half ago. But my struggles had been there for quite some time. I found ways to get around it, but there can be any little slight change to the balance of your workplace or your life that can take away your ability to cope as well as you had in the past. And I venture to say the pandemic has kind of done that for a lot of people. It's very stressful,
Yeah. People who kind of had, things like their coping was just like calibrated perfectly to kind of like get through. The pandemic definitely shifted things for a lot of people. That's a good point.
Right.
And the other piece too for managers that I think is really important to highlight, and you said that, is kind of, people have coping skills. And so just because someone is, succeeding doesn't mean that they don't have stuff going on. And so it still is absolutely worthwhile for managers to be making the effort to check in on every one of their staff, not just the ones they think are having problems, just not just the ones that are kind of falling behind, because sometimes it's the ones that are doing great that are struggling the most just to try to stay afloat.
Yes, and any manager I'm sure knows that performance, like meeting performance expectations, is not the only indicator of success at work. And as you realize that, success looks different for everybody. Meeting the expectations of work takes different levels of effort at different times for different people. So as you recognize that and get to know what coping skills people are using to manage their workload, you can see places where you might be able to add a little support or talk through a solution that might be helpful to make the load feel just a little less heavy to carry. But only a manager can really look and see all of that, to really gain that insight.
Yeah. And they have a little bit more of a bird's eye view
Right.
of not just that employee, but of kind of the other pieces and the available resources. And that's what's really helpful. Not that as a manager, you need to be the one to like fix the problem, but just you get to bring that perspective and then collaboratively, figure out some potential solutions and kind of where you want to go from there.
But there's that tendency though, right? To want to fix it. I mean, that's one great thing about managers. They get in there and do, but that can be so exhausting. And I never want a manager to ever feel like they have to fix every problem or every obstacle that an employee is going through that's preventing them from, having their best work life. That's not the goal. You really just want to be able to help issue spot and direct to resources. You don't have to solve it, but if no one's talking about it, it never gets solved. So
Yeah.
that piece, you don't have to be
Yeah.
everything.
And it's actually detrimental if you try. I mean, not only is it exhausting and it's impossible, it actually has a negative impact because even if the staff was open to you making all of the choices for them, you're not helping them in the long term by not allowing them to again have autonomy and be their own person and make their own decisions about what they need. So, which is hard to do that step back, but when you can just it's more of a mindset shift, but when you can do that, it's actually easier because then I'm not the one trying to make all the pieces and jam them in and fit them in. I can just be like, I'm here to support, and then you just be that and find other resources, right?
Yes.
It's not just the manager that is responsible solely. You're a part of an organization, so figuring out where your support lies, right? Bringing in consultants or trainers or workshops if that's what people need to feel empowered.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't have to be just all on you, but knowing where to get your support is huge.
Very true.
Yeah.
Very true.
So it's been so wonderful having you here on the show, and just I love our conversations always, and I'm just excited to be able to share this conversation out with the world. And if there's anything that kind of any last little bit of advice or just a thought that you want to share with managers when it's really we're thinking about how to best support their team, anything that comes to mind.
The best suggestion I can give is give every single person the benefit of the doubt. Just every single person, no matter what you've seen of them in the past, no matter what you are observing from where you are, give the benefit of the doubt. Just set whatever bias you have to the side and say, you know what? I trust that my people are doing what they're supposed to do. Let me find out how to make it easier for them. And that will go a long way to develop that trust. So,
Absolutely. Wise words. Thanks, Kelly.
thank you. Thanks for having me.
So I absolutely loved that conversation I got to have with Kelly, and I hope that you enjoyed it too. And there was a lot in there for you to really think about as you're kind of figuring out how to best support your staff, especially when we're talking about these hidden needs that are invisible and not so obvious. So if you think that maybe someone on your team has some hidden needs or you are unsure of how to have this conversation, please reach out. I'd love to talk to you about it. Again, improveq.org. You can message me and find me on LinkedIn, Betsaida LeBron on LinkedIn, and just to have these conversations, because I definitely appreciate all the managers, having been a manager myself for many, many years, know how hard it is to balance all of these things. And I just want you to know that you're not alone in this. You have the support. Reach out. If there's any way that I can help, improveq.org. See you next time.